Well, I want to welcome you to our program today. Our guest is Cecil Murphey, otherwise just wanting to be known as Cease. And so, Cease, welcome. Good to have you with us. And if you joined us last week, you learned a lot about Cease and that he is quite an author. He has authored 137 books, a lot of very popular books. One such book is 90 Minutes in Heaven. It's a story about Don Piper, a pastor who was in a terrible car accident. He was dead for 90 minutes. Another pastor came, prayed for him, and he came back to life. And it's really quite a very inspiring, very riveting story about a man's experience being in heaven, and then also his recovery and the ministry that this man has had. And so a lot of a lot of Cease's writings have been where he, well, here again, you have to forgive me for this, but being a ghostwriter, being that a lot of famous people are interested, or people will have an autobiography, but somebody has to write the story or their autobiography for them, and that's where Cease has got such a very gifted, such a very gifted ability to write. And so, like for instance, another book that he's written is Rebel with a Cause. That's a book about Franklin Graham, the son of Billy Graham. He has also written Gifted Hands. That's an autobiography of Ben Carson, who was a neurosurgeon, and also has been a political candidate running for president. And so being the ghostwriter is that, well, we're hearing about a lot of people, but it's always interesting to hear about you. And so one of the things why we're having him on for a second program here is that he's got quite a story to tell about himself. Not to say that all of his writing experience isn't enough to write 137 books, but when it comes to the whole issue of sexual abuse, it's hard for people to talk about this. A lot of times people, have dealt with this but have kept it quiet. They're sometimes looking for somebody who, can speak on this topic or write on this topic to bring, healing and to help them to work through that. And so I'm just going to have you share a little bit about your story, Cease.
Sure. Well, let me tell you my background, that'll kind of help you. I grew up in Davenport. My father was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. I have 3 brothers. They all died of the disease. I have 3 sisters. They married alcoholics. And there was something wrong with me because alcohol just didn't have that kind of an appeal. I was sexually assaulted by a female relative quite young, and when I was like 7 or 8 years old, we rented a room to an elderly man, and he was a pedophile. He sexually assaulted one of my sisters and me. My father found out and kicked him out. So I had all this sexual abuse, and then my father was what I call a functional alcoholic. He never missed a day of work, but he rarely missed a weekend when he wasn't drunk. And he beat, I got most of it as the boy that got most of it, and one of my sisters got quite a bit of it too, but he beat me just ruthlessly. And I've learned, and I don't know why, but I thought, he's not gonna make me cry. So I remember at 11 years old, I decided I would never cry. He would never make me cry again. Well, it worked, except I never cried for the next 40 years. I'm a runner, and when I was 51 years old, I was running one day, and I usually run like 6 miles a day, and one day I ran 12 or 13 miles, and on my way home, I just all of a sudden, I started crying, and see, I lived without memories of these things. It's a form of denial, but we call it amnesia. And I didn't remember it, but as I was running, all of a sudden these memories started pouring back. And I could hardly stop crying. My wife was at work, and so she got home. I told her. I also called my best friend, and he was home, so he came over and spent a couple hours with me, just letting me cry, just held me and let me cry. The memory started coming back. And for a long time, other than those 2 or 3 friends, I didn't talk about it because I didn't know how. And then finally I realized that this is true with me, and I didn't tell anybody or didn't even remember it for a long time, there had to be a lot of other men like that. So I started talking, sharing it with people, began to find out about a lot of other men, meeting other men all around the country. And I live in Atlanta now, and there was a group, a non-Christian group called just a men's group, and we met regularly, and these guys were really good for me. They knew I was a believer, and they didn't have any problem with that. But they really encouraged me just to open myself, and I talked. There were 6 of us in our group. I just was really opening up to them, and they were very kind. So finally, I started writing a couple of articles about male sexual abuse and published them. So I thought, oh, well, the Christian publishing world is open to this, the Christian world. So I wrote a book called When a Man You Love Was Abused, and I couldn't sell it. I'm a prolific writer. I sell almost everything I write. And it took me 6 years to get that book published. But it's subtitled A Woman's Guide to Help the Man You Love. But it's also for men. And then I did a second book called Not Quite Healed. I have a blog called menshatteringthesilence.blogspot.com. And what I'm trying to do, Jeff, is to talk about this. See, in the Christian world, most of us are kind of afraid to talk about it. We're afraid people think we're gay or there's just something wrong with us. Women have been able to talk about this for at least 20 years, but we're just now coming forth, and a lot of us are hurting men. And we need to be loved and cared for. And my wife and my best friend, they're the two, they were there. They never tried to fix me. They just loved on me and let me cry.
Yeah, so when I just hear about what you experienced as a young boy, when there's alcohol abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse,
and verbal abuse.
I mean, and to look at your career and what you've been able to accomplish. I mean, I'm just amazed, how you survived that.
I am too.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't a believer. My family went to church, and I really wasn't a Christian until I was age 21. I just came to a place one day where I fell in love with a woman, thought I'd spend the rest of my life with her, and she dumped me. But I began to ask the questions like, is this all there is in life? Up and down. And I was in the Navy then. And so I got hold of a New Testament. I'm not sure why, but I started reading, and just started reading it straight through, and I got to Romans 10:20. I was found of those who sought not for me. And I remember stopping, thinking, wait a minute. I believed this, and I wasn't looking for God. I didn't know what I wanted, but I was looking for God. So I guess I believe this now. So what do I do now? I hadn't been inside a church in 11 years. So I didn't know what to do for a long time. I thought, well, I guess I better go to a church. So I started visiting churches, found a church, happened to be a Baptist church, welcomed in there, met my wife, and that's my story. Yeah. But let me just say this, Jeff. I think with me, I can honestly say, Romans 8:28, we know that all things work together for good. And I look back now, and I went through an awful lot of pain and suffering. I don't want to deny that. But I don't think I could be as caring a person as I am, and I'm not perfect yet, but I don't think I could be as compassionate, as caring as I am if I hadn't had those horrendous experiences myself.
Isn't that something? It seems like a lot of the people that I know were some of the most compassionate and caring and loving are people who have gone through so much pain
because we have to,
and hardship in
and
their
we've
lives.
gone through it. See, my brothers, they just gave up. They all turned to alcohol. We all have to find some way to deal with our pain. I chose amnesia unconsciously. I didn't consciously. But we all have to find some way. But the people who really do something with their lives, I think, are people who take that pain and let God turn it around in their lives. At least that's what happened to me.
Yeah, because as I said, some of the most compassionate people are some of the people who have suffered the most. But then some of the most bitter, hardened, people that I know have suffered.
That's right.
Really, and so it's like your brothers, well, they went to alcohol as a way to kind of drown themselves from
Yeah, that's
all of
right.
this experience. But for you, our Lord was a strength,
It's called grace. That's the only
The
answer I
grace,
have. It's
yeah.
called grace.
the grace. And so now, but you never cried. It's like you kind of repressed or bottled up all of these emotions all these years.
Well, let me try another way. I was numb. Let me give you an example. My wife was involved in a serious car accident, and they didn't expect her to live, and God healed her, by the way. But I was in Hilldale, Illinois, and I was there in the emergency room next to her. Here's the person I love most in the whole world, and I was totally numb. I could feel nothing. Well, that's typical of guys like me who repressed it. I could feel nothing. And then I thought, what's wrong with me? And every time I get this really heavy emotional thing, I numb out. Thank God I'm past that. But that's the way I lived for most of my life. I didn't know it wasn't normal. How do you know it's not normal? Until I finally began to feel my feelings.
And that, you said when you're out for that run at age 51, that was a significant, I mean, you've been carrying all of this within yourself
Yeah.
for all this time. I mean, crying is a way that we can express our inner emotions as a catharsis. And here you weren't even giving yourself the permission to do that.
Yeah, once I started, I went on for days and days and days.
Well, all the years of that repressed, all that just coming out.
Yeah, that's right.
So you run and being able to cry for days. But then you also mentioned that you had this support group of, what do you say, 6 men?
Yeah, well, there were 6 of us all together.
6 of you all together?
My best friend heard about this group. It was just called the Men's Movement in Atlanta, and he said, it's not for me. He wasn't much of a group person. He said, but I think they're the kind of men that would understand. Now, it was a Christian group, and I was very clear about that when I joined them. They said, yeah, that's okay. Our intention was to be open and vulnerable to each other. And, you know, if I tried to, they didn't mind if I talked about God, but they did want me to use God as an excuse. Let me give you an example. I was talking about an editor I worked with, and I said, and he treated me very bad, but I've forgiven him. And one of the guys named John, he said, no, you have not forgiven him. I said, yeah, I have. He said, no, I can tell by your voice and your face, you're still holding something. And I realized I had, and I got that straightened out. But see, that's what this group did for me. See, it really made me honest and open. And I realized that I could open myself to people, and many of them heard me. Here, I write little sayings, and here's one of mine. I would rather be disliked for who I am than to be admired for who I'm not.
Oh, wow, that's
So I
profound.
want people to know me. If they don't like me, they don't like me. But I don't want people to admire me for who I'm not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but to have a group of men that you can confide in, where they just say, you can talk about anything, you know, what a blessing that is.
Yeah, we met every Thursday night for 4 years. And we said, if you're not here, you're either dead or you bring a note from your mother.
Okay. Yeah, but you would really kind of hold each other accountable, and
Oh,
you would
yes.
challenge each other.
Yep.
You know, you're getting right down to the very depth of who
That's
you
right.
are, and there was no bluffing in this whole thing, it sounds like.
And it was so refreshing. See, one thing that I don't know if this is true where I was, all the Christians were too nice. You know, they all seemed to be happy, and you know, they didn't have these kind of problems, and even if they did, you couldn't talk to them about it. I had to go outside the church to find help.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so...
Why do you suppose that is with the church?
Well, I think because we're afraid of these. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't...
Sounds like it's like putting on some kind of a mask or a facade.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that, because, you know, we're all supposed to be happy and joyful. Well, when I start talking to men, as I said, I have a blog. Some of these men are just so gutsy, and now they're just really opening up. And I'm trying to help other men to be free, and being free means to be transparent.
Being able to be transparent. Yeah, and so that's all part of what, you know, I just was kind of wondering what advice you would give to anybody who's listening to say, Yeah, I've been holding this in for years. It's kind of a taboo topic. How do I even share this with anybody? So, what encouragement would you give, for instance, to a man? Because, not to say that it's obviously very devastating for a woman who's been sexually abused, but you mentioned about men.
Oh, I think it's much more difficult in our society. I would say, one of the big problems with men is because, see, we know that 97%, I don't know where they got that figure, but 97% of boys who were sexually molested were molested by somebody they knew, not strangers in the park. A family friend, somebody they should have been able to trust. Mm-hmm. Like the old man who rented a room from us, people I should have been able to trust, the female relative I should have been able to trust. And so they've stolen that trust for us. So many of us are just so afraid to trust anybody. But somewhere, if you're going to be healed, somewhere you got to take a chance and tell somebody and share with someone. Someone that won't try to fix you or condemn you, but just hear you and care for you. And one of the things I've tried to say, particularly to women, is listen, a lot of women carry their own, the whole emotional baggage of their boyfriends or husbands or sons. Said, listen, just let him talk. You're either his wife or you're his therapist. You can't be both. If you're his wife or your girlfriend, just let him talk. And all you have to keep saying is, I don't understand, but I love you. And that's all they want, is they just want somebody they can trust who will listen to them.
Yeah, so a lot of times when you think about a person, the gift of their presence and their gift of their being able to listen in a compassionate, caring way, but not somebody that's necessarily there to fix you.
That's right.
But just that you need somebody that you can talk to.
Well, a lot of times, I have to say in defense of the people who do the fixing, a lot of times it's out of their discomfort. They feel like they have to say something. And particularly, I think with Christians, we have to give them a Bible verse. We have to give them something to set them right. And sometimes, like you just said, the gift of their physical presence is the most giving thing they can give, to represent Jesus Christ by their loving, caring attitude. They just don't understand how significant that is to a hurting person.
Yeah. Well, when you think about men, men are, well, generally speaking, independent. They want to kind of have that sense of being, kind of self-made.
Of course.
And that it's hard to admit weakness, any fault. And also men are kind of in that fix-it role.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and so...
That's what our society's done to us.
Mm-hmm. That's what our society has done to us. And so it's not just so much, well, you're a man, and so this is the way God has programmed you, as it's kind of the way that maybe society has conditioned men.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And do you think with men and women's roles in society changing, that's maybe changing a little bit then for men and women as far as just
I think culture is changing. You see much more aggression or assertion with women, and I think you're beginning to see men who show the feminine side in a positive way, the softness. All I want, I don't understand all that. Jeff. All I want to say is, I want to be as open, as transparent as I can. Mm-hmm. If I'm open to you, whatever it is, if I'm totally open to you, you will trust me. If you trust me, then I can help you or listen to you. And if you don't trust me, you're not going to open up to me. So I'm just trying to be a trustworthy, caring person. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we have to offer each other.
Well, I think a lot of that is being a friend. A friend is somebody that you can trust. A friend is somebody who will sit and listen, will take the time. And so it sounds to me like there was just a lot of healing in the fact that you had people, number one, who you could trust, and number two, that you could bare your heart, your soul to.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a best friend. We've been best friends now like 30 years. And we don't remember exactly who said it, but I think I take credit for it. We were talking one day, and I said to him, David, you were everybody's best friend, weren't you? And he said, yeah. And I said, did you ever have a best friend? And he thought, no. And then same with me. He said, you ever have a best friend? No. I was everybody else's best friend. So we said, okay, I want to be your best friend. So what we did, we decided we were going to meet every single week that I'm in town for an hour, 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, and just open our heart to each other. That's it. Nothing, no agenda, just being transparent and open. And you know, it doesn't all happen one day. You know, as you trust each other, you open up. And you know, after I began to cry, David still wasn't much of a crier. One day, I saw a flicker of tears in his eyes, and I said something about it, and that opened him up. He's never going to be a big crier, but he said to me so many times, "That's the moment I understood your irrefutable love." Mm-hmm. And I think that's the kind of love Jesus Christ wants us to have for each other, that irrefutable love.
Irrefutable love. And so love is another big component to all this. I mean, isn't that part of what we all, I mean, that's something that men and women have in common, is that we all need to be loved, and love will heal a lot of hurt and pain. Mm-hmm.
Sure. And you know, the other thing too, I have to tell you, is that I write about this, and part about this writing when I do it, and I blog twice a week on this topic, is because every time I do it, it's part of my healing.
Okay.
You know, I keep finding areas of my life. Okay, for instance, you think it's wonderful I've written 137 books, and in some ways it is, but what most people don't know, I was a driven man. See, my father was so brutal, and he used to tell me I was lazy. I wasn't, but somehow I had to do my brother's chores if they didn't do it, so I always did more. I'm one of those compulsive overcomers. So you see, I was already set up as a kid, so why wouldn't I write 137 books? See, I was trying to prove that I was worth something. Value. Mm-hmm. I'm slowing down now finally and enjoying my life. I'm working, but working a lot less, because now I realize I'm worthwhile just being who I am.
Just being who you are. It's not, yeah, because when I look at Cecil Murphey, it's just like, wow, I get to meet Cecil Murphey today. And I have him on the program, and it's just this is, I mean, just being in your presence, okay? But Cecil Murphey being special, even if he hadn't written a note.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But all that to try to overcompensate what you had to deal with as a young child.
You got it.
Mm-hmm. To say that somehow this all balances out, that I've got some kind of a self-worth, where really you can take the whole scale away and really just say, but it's being, what would you say, a child of God, loved by God, accepted by God, that you find your peace.
Yeah, and that's part of what because I have understood God's grace and love, it enables me to reach out to other people. You talked earlier about suffering and so on. And the way I like to put it is, I try to give to other people what I didn't get in childhood. There's something about giving it, helping other people, reaching out to them, that comes back and makes me feel better about life and my relationship to Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so you talk about crying, you talk about being able to share, writing. I mean, all these are like a catharsis, getting it out. But then also, the healing of your relationship, to have Jesus in your life, that there's so much healing in that. But then also, to put yourself in a position where you are ministering to others, and there's lots of healing in that as well.
That's right. Mm-hmm. You got it.
Mm-hmm. And so that's, a lot of the advice that you would have for somebody who's going through something like this, is find a way to get it out.
Yeah, find a way to get it out. Find somebody, a few people, a group. My blog, I invite people to comment, and if they don't want to use their name, just anonymous, or just make up a name. And some of them start out like anonymous, or they give a name like John, which is their middle name, or something. I don't care. We don't care. And not just me, but all the people who have subscribed. There's a professor at Moody Bible Institute that responds regularly, because he's a survivor. Mm-hmm. And these guys are feeling loved, even though we're not close to them. And probably that's just, some of these guys are afraid to get too close, and so online is safe for them. And then as they begin to open up and they talk to other men, then the healing really comes for them.
So a blog, you know, so they can get on their computer and join in this network of support. And so to get on your blog, I'm sure we can have that up on the screen
But,
here.
yeah, just Google my name, Cecil Murphey, and you'll go to my website and it'll show where my blog is for male survivors. It's called Men Shattering to Silence.
Yeah, so there's hope and healing, that people don't have to just continue to carry this burden, you know, this burden in life around. You know, when you can actually find that there are people who love you and care about you, and that God cares and loves about you, and this is, you know, a way that God is.
And I think another thing too, Jeff, there's so many symptoms, but another one is shame. Even though it wasn't our fault, sometimes our perpetrators make us feel as if we caused it or we wanted it. You know, frankly, when somebody does a sexual molestation, it feels good. That's the whole point. It feels good. Therefore, as kids, we assume that it feels good, so I must have done it. I must have caused it. I must have wanted it. That's not true. You know, when you stimulate parts of the body, it's a natural reaction. And so we take the blame for something that was done to us. The way I like to say it is, I always thought I was a bad kid, and I realized I wasn't bad. Something bad was done to me.
Imagine there's just a lot of different issues
yeah.
that people have to deal with this whole thing, and I can see where it'd be easy just to kind of just get encased in yourself and become an angry, bitter person in life, or you can take that step of faith and to say, well, there is hope, that there's healing, there's an opportunity to kind of work through a lot of this. Well, today we've been so delighted to have with us Cecil Murphey. Just a very popular and well-known author, has authored 137 books. But today, being able to share his story about sexual abuse and survival, but also hope and healing. So, Cecil, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for
God
having
bless
me.
you. This
Thank
has
you.
been just such a wonderful time to have you on our program today. And I want to thank all of you for joining us.